You know, it's quite rare I get requests for videos. Occasionally I might get the odd film suggestion, but it's rare that a decent chunk of people ask for a video on a specific topic from me. And, well, who am I to deny you guys a bit of a break from our usual patter? So, today we're going to be talking about video nasties. More specifically, we're going to be talking about video nasty bootlegs and censorship in the UK beyond 1984. And to go one further still, we're going to be taking a look at a recent haul I picked up of online bootleg nasties. So, buckle up, maybe grab a beer or something, because for this one, you're going to be in it for the long haul. So, a flash history lesson. From VHS's inception in the UK, videotapes were generally released either without any kind of rating or guidance, or they just had the film's cinema release rating slapped right on the box and shoved unceremoniously out the door. It was the Wild West, and it was largely down to renters' discretion as to whether little Timmy was allowed to leave his local library with a copy of Cannibal Holocaust or not. Seriously, it was all down to the best educated judgment of someone who'd probably not only not seen the movie, but probably didn't care who saw it anyway. Naturally, as VHS rose to prominence in the late 70s and early 80s, more and more horror movies slowly found their way into VHS rental shops, and stronger material was regularly finding its way into the hands of children and the vulnerable. This created an outrage amongst moral crusaders and the "won't somebody please think of the children" crowd, who saw the lack of any kind of barrier between these strong, gory tapes and innocent children as a gateway to sin and suffering. They basically had two bees in their bonnet, one being that they didn't like the idea of kids being able to rent zombie flesh eaters lest they imitate it or become corrupted by it, or two, that it could fall into the hands of somebody mentally unstable and inspire them or hypnotise them into going on a murderous, rampaging massacre. And so they set out to completely and totally ban these films from ever being seen by anyone, as they deemed anyone who would want to watch these movies as immoral or degenerate. At first they were seen as cranks, then politicians started listening to them, then general members of the public started agreeing with the politicians, and in 1984, through much bluster, the Video Recordings Act was passed into law. This law outlined that no tape in the UK could be sold or rented without classification, that no film could be sold or rented to anyone under the age of that classification, and that certain films would be voided for sale, recalled and destroyed for being too dangerous to have out in the public. These were the video nasties, and they were split into three lists, categories 1, 2 and 3. The first being a list of films so foul that someone owning them would definitely be prosecuted if they were found out. The second being a list of films that, if a seller or trader ended up in court for owning these, it would be very likely that they could be prosecuted for owning them. And a third list that was drafted but never really implemented, of films for police officers to keep an eye out for and that may possibly hint to a seller or renter having category 1 or 2 tapes in their possession. So far, so draconian. But just because they banned these films didn't mean that they just went away. Quite the opposite, in fact. As soon as these films became illegal, inevitably everyone wanted to see the films they tried to ban. And a booming underground trade for dubbed copies of these films became a genuine money spinner, with video store owners dubbing their nasties onto blanks and then handing the legit copies in, or simply sneaking them out the back door to friends who'd make dubs for friends, family, or anyone who just really wanted to see Anthropophagus. Of course, this wasn't without its own pitfalls, and the police would semi-regularly raid bootleggers' houses and video stores for their tapes. But for every wall put up, the bootleggers had a workaround, from storing extra tapes off-site with friends to going so far as to travel to America and Europe where these films were all legally available and uncut, and then pulling the reels out of the tape, sellotaping them down and sewing them into their own clothes to be re-spooled and recased back in the UK. Between 1985 and 1998, trading nasties could be almost as illicit as drug smuggling at times. And while the banned list never grew past its initial lot really, in fact, quite the opposite happened when The Evil Dead was delisted as a video nasty after Sam Raimi literally flew to London to testify in court that the film was too absurd to ever be taken seriously. The BBFC continued to keep a firm grip on what films were allowed in and out of the country. You see, they didn't need to ban anything, they could just simply stop a movie from ever entering the country in the first place, by implying to the submitters that the films wouldn't pass if they were submitted. Films like Silent Night, Deadly Night were submitted for classification to get a UK release, and were told by the censors in no uncertain terms that if they wanted to waste money attempting to get this film past the censors, then fine, but it will be rejected every time. So they just didn't bother submitting it in the first place. So it wasn't just that in 1984 the UK had a bit of a barmy and decided to ban a load of European slashers and US grindhouse flicks. They pretty much put a stranglehold on the horror and sci-fi industry for the best part of a decade, fending off anything controversial by effectively strangling it in the crib. But that just made UK horror fans even more determined to seek out these films. And slowly but surely, as the police began to back off raiding people's houses for tapes and the Nasties kind of faded from view at the end of the 80s, corridors and connections sprung up with US collectors, who would send uncut dubs of movies like The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and Blood-Sucking Freaks across the Atlantic to horror fans who were hungry to see what they'd been missing. Equally, throughout the 90s, there were several attempts to get these films put out there officially. Heavily cut versions of some of the more notorious Nasties were made available with certification. But who wants to watch a splatterfest with all the splatter taken out? It was a start, but it wasn't enough. Finally, in 1999, there was a change of guard at the British censors and a raft of new legislation came into immediate effect. The results? Between 1999 and 2021, almost all of the Nasties ended up having uncut DVD or Blu-ray releases in the UK. And everything was fine, and censorship as an issue faded from view into the British sunset, never to be heard of again. Anyway, that's where we are today, but why am I telling you this? Well, it's because a while ago, while I was browsing my local online marketplace just to see if anything interesting was up for sale, I landed on an advert for a collection of 17 bootleg tapes, most of them Nasties, going for only about £20. Now, to the uninitiated, there is a level of snobbery in the tape collecting community around bootlegs, with the general consensus being that usually the quality was awful and why would you own a copy if you could own the original? But the reality of the situation is that unless you were very well connected and had a lot of money to burn in the mid to late 80s, or you were alive before 1984, the odds of you ever actually seeing and owning an original Video Nasty pre-cert of, say, Anthropophagus or Love Camp 7 or The Bogeyman was about as likely as you winning the lottery every day for a week. Equally, as of 2021, some Video Nasties have gotten so prohibitively expensive that unless you're loaded, being financed to collect them, or land on an absolute bargain, you're very unlikely to ever own some of these titles. Cannibal Holocaust has nearly doubled in cost since I started collecting and now regularly sells for between £150 and £300 in just good condition. To me, these bootleg tapes are a different kind of history. They aren't particularly valuable, but they're a snapshot into the kind of quality that was available to the average Brit who may or may not have been that well connected, but still wanted to experience these films as intended. They may not be worth much, but these bootlegs, they have heart, they have travel and history, and they feel more exciting and dangerous now than owning an original copy ever could, really. So anyway, less than a week later they were here, and I was so excited that I posted a little unboxing video to Twitter where a few people really took interest and wanted me to do a bit of a deep dive as to what was on these tapes, and more importantly, if there were any hidden goodies on there. And well, this is that video. So, without further ado, in total 17 tapes arrived, and the first step was to assess whether what was on the box was what was on the tape. I also needed to do a quick spot check for mould or tape damage, as the last thing I wanted to do was stick a mouldy tape in that would gunk up my machine, or put a damaged tape in that would just end up as my VCR's lunch. So I spot checked all 17, and of the 17, 4 were mouldy and 1 was irreparably damaged. Luckily, the one that was irreparably damaged only contained a copy of Basket Case and Slaughter High, the former of which I own not only on Blu-ray fully uncut, but I also own the original pre-cert VHS release of this in minty condition. The latter I have on DVD, and the last time I saw it, I wasn't too fussed. So mercifully, the only one I couldn't play was the one I'd already got pretty well covered. As for the mouldy tapes, 3 had small splodges and 1, as you can see in this video, was in pretty bad condition. Luckily, the years of skulking VHS Facebook groups and websites has really paid off, as I know how to clean a mouldy tape. And as you can see here, a quick pass through with some isopropyl alcohol and a night to dry off, and these babies were looking good as new. The rest of the tapes had some minor issues with pancaking, basically where over time the film begins to slightly unspool, which can cause it to be chewed up by the machine, but after a quick tighten of the sprockets they were good as new, and I gave them all a quick fast forward and rewind just to make sure that none of them were sticky and to help tighten up the reels. And then, starting with the most delicate tapes, I began the slow, real-time process of digitising them all in 720p to my computer. Because while owning these tapes is super nice, it's always good to keep a backup. Anyway, this is what I found. Kicking things off, the first feature, Combat Shock, is a trauma-distributed action horror thriller that kind of meshes Taxi Driver, First Blood and Driller Killer into a single, slightly OTT splatterfest. I haven't seen this one and have heard very little about it, but the clips I saw while digitising it have more than caught my interest, and I'm looking forward to checking it out in the near future. It's a reasonable quality dub, I'd say it was probably 3rd generation, and it looks pretty decent. The second feature on this tape was Beyond the Darkness, a film I've often very nearly almost kinda picked up from 88 Films whenever they have a sale on, but I've never quite bitten the bullet. It looks like your typical Italian slasher fodder, and again, it's one I'm really quite curious to check out. This is a copy from a European version. It has the English dub but foreign subtitles. I believe this came from the French release of the film. Either way, it's also pretty solid quality, most likely 3rd or 4th gen, either a copy of the original tape or a copy of a copy, and well, beggars can't be choosers. This is definitely more than watchable. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything on the runoff of this one. Both films literally filled the whole tape with about 5 minutes to spare. Still, it's early days and there's still plenty of goodies to find. Tape 2 contained a double feature of Herschel Gordon Lewis movies, The Gruesome Twosome and The Wizard of Gore. And oh god, this is so embarrassing. Okay, I have a bit of a confession. At this point in time, I haven't seen a single Herschel Gordon Lewis film. A few years ago, I tried to correct this by buying the Arrow Video's Feast collection, basically his entire filmography, but for how much it cost, I couldn't bring myself to open it. So these are definitely films that need to be seen, and definitely ones I'd more than love to check out. I digitised them both, and I hope to watch them as soon as possible. Both of these films are from Rhino, which is a US company, and if these are US imports, then these are 3rd or 4th gen prints at best, because they'd have been copied from the dub Rhino made, itself a 2nd gen dub, and then dubbed from NTSC to PAL in order for it to work on UK players. The quality's more than watchable though my print isn't really much to shout about, it's a bit washed out. Again though, this is what people at the time had to work with, and it looks as grisly, noisy and messy as I think any of Gordon Lewis's films probably should. Equally, as a rather nice bonus, on the runoff of this tape was a trailer for Return of the Aliens, The Deadly Spawn. It's just known as The Deadly Spawn over here, but it looked more than fun enough for me to pop it on my list of movies to check out in the very near future. Tape 3 really was when things started to get interesting. Kicking things off, we have the continuation of a Herschel Gordon Lewis marathon with 2000 Maniacs. Again via Rhino, and again in pretty decent quality given the trip it's had to travel to arrive in my film collection in 2021. But it's the second feature on this tape that's really interesting to me. Terror on Tape. A 1985 compilation of trailers from various Video Nasties and super deep cut titles, a more than decent chunk of which I've never heard or seen of ever. Seriously, who's ever heard of The Eerie Midnight Horror Show or Madhouse Mansion? Either way, it's co-hosted and has narration from John Carradine and Cameron Mitchell, and boy howdy if this one isn't getting on our commentary series in the near future. It's perfect fun to pop on with friends, and one that's definitely going to be staying in my collection. And, going one further, this is the first tape with a decent runoff, and to 21st century eyes it's probably quite disturbing. So context is key here. The last 40 minutes of this tape are quick-cut montages of gory murders, action-packed slayings, and all the kinds of video nastiness you could imagine, super cut together into one long, unbroken montage with no context. The first time I sat through this, after about 10 minutes, I started to feel very uncomfortable. Mainly because there is no context to these decapitations, limbs being ripped off, or skin removed. It's just gory nastiness after gory nastiness, not particularly well cut together either. But then, you really have to take in the period of time that this compilation was cut together. It was used as filler at the end of a particularly gory double feature, and at the time, none of this footage would have been legally viewable in the UK. In essence, the bootleggers here have given the audience a bonus in the form of all the nastiness they should have seen in the cinema, and they're putting it right back into their hands for viewing in the comfort of their own home. As someone who's always been fascinated by deleted scenes, I can't deny that being able to see censor clips from zombie flesh eaters or The Terminator back in the 80s or 90s, when this footage just wasn't easily available, would have been more than tantalising, to say the least. Tape 4 was a pretty solid contender. The first feature was 1980's Maniac, and the version I'm watching here is an American dub. And it's not a bad copy. I'd say probably 4th or 5th generation, a US tape or a copy of a US tape, dubbed to PAL format and then maybe duped once more for good measure. Some of the darker moments in this movie are a little crushed out of existence, but yeah, I've seen this movie before. It was okay, but it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. I've made a copy of it to save a bit of cash, but honestly, much like films like The New York Ripper or Night Train Murders, I'm not 100% sold on the women get mutilated graphically for 90 minutes genre. The second feature was Zombie Holocaust, also known as Dr. Butcher MD, and it's really quite ropey. I'd probably say it was 6th or even 7th gen, the picture's quite degraded, the copy quite washed out. It's not a pleasant watch in all honesty, and I'm not entirely sold on the movie either. It's not as good as, say, Burial Ground or any of the Zombie Flesh Eater unofficial sequels. It's just kind of alright. I own this one on Blu-ray and DVD anyway, so it's not one I feel too bad about not capturing. On the runoff of this tape was as much of Evil Dead 2 as could be crammed onto 20 minutes of leftover tape. It's not bad quality either, and for the time this tape was dubbed, it was likely that this was pretty much imminently after it got a home video release. I'd have thought it was pretty cool, because at the time this tape was dubbed, there was possibly a little animosity around whether Evil Dead 2 would even get a release in the UK, let alone an uncut one. But it did end up getting multiple retail releases, all uncut, and I already own the original video store rental release of this tape on VHS, and I have DVD and Blu-ray copies, so this was a nice treat, but it's not something that necessarily left me picking my jaw up off the floor. This one's super clean cut. We have 2 Ilsa movies, Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS and Ilsa Harem Keeper of the Oil Sheiks. I've not seen either of these. I really wanted to see some Ilsa movies over the last few years because they're not so easy to come across uncut in the UK, so both of these were must-haves for me, and I really can't wait to give them a spin. Both tapes are sourced from foreign copies, I believe either French or German releases, and both have burnt-in subtitles for the most part, and both are in very good condition. I'd say 3rd or 4th generation copies. Equally, due to this tape being 3 hours long, both films fit on there nice and snugly, with little to no runoff. So no bonuses here at the end of the tape, which was a bit of a downer, but the features more than make up for it. Another piece of media history. On tape 6, I found the 50-ish minute OVA Yuritsuki Doji Legend of the Overfiend, a notorious hentai anime from the late 80s that is very much a distinctive part of history in British censorship. This OVA has numerous scenes of rape, full penetration, and tons of big, wobbly tentacle penises. The BBFC took one look at this in 1990 and basically said it would never be released in the UK while censors drew breath. Then in the mid to late 90s it did get a release, but it was a release that was drastically cut down to remove all of the penetration, mask most of the nudity, and heavily truncate most of the rape scenes. In short, they deporned this porn movie. And even to this day, that's the only cut that's available in the UK. It's never been re-released outside of the castrated VHS and DVD release, and that's it. So to own a tape of an uncut copy of it from 1989, sourced from Penthouse Video's release of it, well, it's kinda special. And most bizarrely, the tape wasn't a nasty, and it wasn't even illegal to own. The BBFC just pulled the crap of, you can submit it but we won't accept it, to the filmmakers, who then just didn't bother. At least in the first instance. Now, here's where I end up in a moral dilemma. Firstly, I'm not a massive fan of Urotsuki Doji movies. I've seen 3 or 4 of the 5 movies they made for this franchise, and the best I can say really about them is I didn't absolutely hate the second one. The rest, I want to keep my distance, kind of. The problem with this tape, it's in surprisingly good condition, definitely a second generation dub, but it's dubbed in Japanese with no subtitles, meaning it's pretty much useless to me. The only reason I'd want to own this tape is for the history of it being a film so controversial that the BBFC refused to certify it, that and the fact that it also happened to be dubbed at the time when it was seen as taboo. Other than that, I'll probably never watch this again because I have no means to understand it, and frankly, it's really not my scene. As you can imagine, with it being a 50-minute-ish long OVA, the rest of the 3-hour tape is just rammed with trailers for late 80s and early 90s anime series. But there are quite a lot of repeats, and being honest, while it was kinda cool to see trailers for Bubblegum Crisis and other series from that era, 90% of them were either series I was familiar with and wasn't really that interested in, or just flat out never got localised over here in the first place. Either way, there's way too many of them to share here, and I'd almost certainly get a copyright block of some kind for doing so, but I just want to say, I sat through all of them and it got very samey after the first hour. And so this one, probably the one I'm most torn about whether to keep or not. Tape 7 is probably the lowest quality one so far. Initially I thought it just contained a really ropey copy of Silent Night Deadly Night, but there was quite a bit more to play with on this one. All the films sourced on this tape came from America. I'm pretty confident in saying that Silent Night Deadly Night didn't get a UK release due to more or less the same reasons why it got heavily edited for the US release. Too much gore, too many boobies, not enough Christian love. This copy is probably somewhere around the 6th to 8th generation in terms of copy, and it's super ropey with tons of audio dropouts. Again, at the time, a UK viewer would have been grateful just for this, because it was usually quite literally this or nothing. But yeah, I own a pristine Blu-ray now, and I have a pretty decent DVD copy too, so a border unwatchable copy of this isn't something that I'd be too keen to keep hold of. However, there was a hidden, unlisted second feature on this tape, which was a 10th, maybe even 11th generation copy of Videodrome. And I want to make it abundantly clear, whereas a super choppy copy of Silent Night Deadly Night didn't really lend itself to being digitised, a copy of Videodrome where you can barely make out what's even going on through the snowstorm is terrifically appealing to me on an aesthetic level. This is a film literally designed to be viewed as mangled and mutilated as possible, and through a hazy, overly red sea of noise, this movie's themes and vibe blossom into a truly wonderful experience. I own this one on Blu-ray and DVD, but honestly, I think this dub may become my favourite way of watching this film. As for the runoff, it's about 20 minutes of a near unwatchable copy of The Evil Dead. We're well into the teens when it comes to generational copy here. It's literally on the verge of just being colourful static. And at some points on the tape, it is just colourful static. But again, at the time it was very hard to find a fully uncut Evil Dead, so I understand why this is here, but, like, I own the original Video Nasty version of this movie uncut on VHS, and I have multiple cuts of this film on DVD and Blu-ray, so while I'm showing you here the kind of quality that people who sought after bootlegs would tolerate, this is well beyond anything I'd have been able to have settled for. Yeesh. Tape 8 was quite low quality viewing. Emmanuel and the Last Cannibals was the first feature on this, and it's a ropey quality copy dubbed from a US source. I'd probably say it was around the 6th generation in terms of quality. I don't know a tremendous amount about this feature, truthfully, but I have heard that it's a fun enough watch, so it's one I've copied and I look forward to checking it out at some point in the future. The second feature was Necromantic, which I own it on DVD, Blu-ray, I've seen it in the cinema, I reviewed it on my own channel, so owning a from the time ropey as shit bootleg from Germany that really makes the whole thing look especially grisly is a particularly lovely thing to have. It's undubbed and has no subtitles either, but unlike the Urotsuki Doji tape, Necromantic isn't really dialogue heavy, and the plot's pretty straightforward. I was going to keep the tape for Emmanuel anyway, but that just sweetened the deal. As for the runoff, gore trailers. We have a trailer for Necromantic followed by roughly 5 minutes of an extract of the work print of The Lair of the White Worm, which was a really nice find, alongside trailers for Blood Frenzy and The Demon. There's also a film that I can't really identify, and I really can't even show any of it here sadly due to the hardcore nudity and sex involved, featuring a man cutting off a naked woman's leg with a saw while she's bound and gagged to a table. All I can really pick up on is that this film looks a little bit like it could be a 70s or 80s Italian film. All in all, not the biggest and best tape in the set, but definitely a very consistent one. Tape 9 contained one feature, and that's it. An independent film that would probably be considered SOV, even though it appears to be shot on returned film stock ends, 1992's I Was a Teenage Mummy. I looked online for information about this, and IMDb has it listed with less than 40 ratings. It's not the most obscure film I've covered, and I will be covering this movie as a review in the very near future, but it's in great quality, second-gen dub, it looks fun at a glance, and the plot seems like my kind of thing. I have no idea how it ended up on here, it seems like the kind of obscure movie that wouldn't travel very well. But, yeah, I own it, and I'm super happy to have found this. It's finds like this that make sorting through the halls really worthwhile. So I really look forward to checking it out. Equally, there was no runoff, unfortunately, which was a bit of a bummer, but hey, I Was a Teenage Mummy. Oh boy, Tape 10. Jesus Christ. Right, Tape 10 is what in the UK we'd refer to as a bluey. To those outside of the UK, Australia, New Zealand and other parts of Europe, that means porn. And this tape's pretty much chocked with it. Kicking things off, we have The Best of Sex and Violence, a 1981 compilation release from a young Charles Band. In essence, it is what it says on the tin. Just over an hour of trailers for grindhouse and exploitation movies that specialise in graphic violence or tons of nudity. With very, very rare narration and links from John Carradine, who probably had no idea what he was actually there for, the quality of this one's not too bad. It looks to be another second-gen dub of an original Astra tape release. It's one I'll probably keep as some of the films shown look pretty fun. Then, the second feature. The Enema Killer. And it's horror porn. Basically, a guy goes around attacking women, sexually assaulting them and giving them enemas. There isn't a whole lot I can show here, but I can tell you that this is a hardcore feature. You see a lot of people shitting everywhere, and apparently it was based on the true story of the Illinois Enema Bandit. It was released in 1977, and in the US it's called Water Power. Not one for the squeamish. If enema porn is your thing, then hey, this exists. It's a rough copy, looks to me to be 5th or 6th generation, and it may have been filmed off a TV screen at some point, but it's one I've made a copy of and I hope to review it at some point, once I've figured out how to approach the damn thing. After the 2 listed features, we have a bit of a free-for-all. First is a very brief promo for a company distributing other hardcore features, including BDSM flicks, rape roleplay, and other enema-related fodder, none of which I can show here. Then there's about 20 minutes of what looks like a cable channel softcore flick, no title or credits, so I've no idea what the film is, but it looks fairly meh. Then there's an advert for Sanyo video players, which was really nice to see, before the remaining 10 minutes of the run out was just padded out with clips of rape, torture and sexual abuse from various foreign movies such as La Bête, They Call Her One Eye, I Spit on Your Grave and Urotsuki Doji. Basically, it's a closing 10 minutes of aggressive rape, assault and battery to see out what is quite possibly the most questionable tape in this entire collection. This was the tape I'd been waiting to check out since I first saw the advert for this collection, mainly for the first feature on this tape. As mentioned, a pre-cert uncut copy of Cannibal Holocaust is now unobtainably expensive, and if the copy was good, it'd have effectively paid for the haul outright in and of itself. And you know, sometimes good things do just happen. Because what we have here is a true blue 3rd generation copy of the uncut pre-cert of Cannibal Holocaust, and it looks lovely. One that, had all the other tapes been totally unwatchable, this still would have been worth what I paid for this set. I copied this one digitally and with great care as soon as I could. I mean, I already own the Blu-ray of it, but there's something delightful about watching this absolute slice of misery in murky, grainy, fuzzy VHS vision. I was very happy with this one. The next feature was Pieces. This one was reasonable quality, not brilliant, I think maybe 5th, possibly 6th gen. It's a bit murky in places, but it's more than watchable. Though, honestly, I already own this film uncut on Blu-ray, and it isn't really one of those films that lends itself to the VHS aesthetic. So while I copied a couple of extracts to show here, I didn't really see much point in digitising this one. I'll be keeping the tape if nothing else for Holocaust, so it's not like it's going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, this wasn't one that I really would say was an essential to own on VHS. As for the runoff, we have some movie extracts and trailers. My personal favourite was a partial trailer for a French film called Gros Dégueulasse. And I'm not going to say anything about this film here. But here's the plot listing on IMDb, and the film's theme tune has been the music you've been hearing each time we've jumped into a new tape. I really need to see this one. The most notable item beyond that is a good meaty chunk of the opening of A Clockwork Orange, and I can now date this tape to 1987, as A Clockwork Orange was incredibly hard to get a hold of in the UK right up until 1988 when it finally got a home video re-release. Before then it was quite hard to find anything about it. And what's presented here is what appears to be an import tape being filmed off the TV with a colour video camera. It looks very odd, but it was a very pleasant surprise. There were also some brief clips from The Beyond, Faces of Death 3, The Wizard of Gore, and The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. All of these films in '87 were unavailable in the UK, and it's quite likely that these would have appeared on this tape via a US source. Tape 12 is short but sweet. What we have here is a double feature of Burial Ground and The Beast in Heat, also known as SS Hellcamp, which, funnily enough, I reviewed last week on my channel. Not much to say about these. Burial Ground appears to be a 4th or 5th gen copy. It looks decent enough and it's a great movie, though again it's one I already own fully uncut on DVD and Blu-ray, so I have no real burning desire to grab a VHS copy of this one. What with it being really overly murky as well, due to most of it being shot at night or in darkness. The Beast in Heat is a 6th, maybe even 7th gen copy. It looks pretty ropey in places, and occasionally it flickers in and out of black and white due to the signal not being particularly strong on this one. This was one of the mouldy tapes, so I can only assume that mould has played a bit of a part in the reason why it's looking a little bit worse for wear. Not one of my favourite movies, it's a bit boring in all honesty, but hey, it's a Cat 1 video nasty that goes for super silly money online. So I guess I'll just make a copy of it anyway. A tape I'll probably hang on to for burial ground, but not much else. There wasn't even any run-off bonus stuff here. It just ends and the last 20 minutes are blank. What a rip! Well, this should be the last of the porn here. Unless something else is hiding in the run-offs, this entire tape, barring the last 5 minutes, is dubbed from US sources. The first feature is a super clear copy of Blood-Sucking Freaks, a film that's been on my to-watch list for literal years. The UK Blu-ray of this is kind of expensive, so I've always been hesitant to picking it up in case I spent a fortune on something I think is shit, so having this will really let me see if it's my cup of tea. I'd say it was a 2nd or 3rd gen dub from an original source. It looks nice and clean, and the sound quality is definitely more than solid. The second feature is Deep Throat, the infamous hardcore porn film that's probably not going to get a re-release beyond a 2000s era DVD that's now out of print. Due mainly to revelations that started as early as the late 80s claiming that a significant chunk of the cast were either coerced or threatened into performing in this movie. It's some seriously bad shit. As it's so hard to get, I've made a copy purely for archival purposes, and I may try to review it at some point in future, but I've really got to figure out how best to approach this one, because YouTube and controversial hardcore pornography go together about as well as an AA meeting in a brewery. Again, given how old it is, it's remarkably good quality, 4th or 5th generation, more than watchable with just a couple of instances of tape roll throughout. The run-off contained 25 minutes of a film called Pickup Girls, directed by Jess Franco in 1981. Ultimately, it's a movie that lies somewhere between a softcore and hardcore flick. There's a lot of full frontal nudity and some glimpses of erections, but no penetration of any kind. And from what I can tell, the movie just follows 2 escorts as they do the escorting thing. I don't really know what to do with this, because I can't find very much info on it at all, which implies it's rare or not easily sourceable, but because it's porn I can't share it anywhere for preservation. It's a moral dilemma. So I've digitised it, but there's nothing I can really do with it. Finally, the last 5 minutes of this tape contains an off-air TV recording of a sports game show from the UK called A Question of Sport. I don't really do sports, and of the 5 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes is just a montage of people just missing goals, pots, touchdowns, and other various wins. So, next tape. Tape 14 was a bit dull in all honesty. It's probably the dullest tape of this collection. On it was a pretty solid, 4th generation copy of the 1975 movie Snuff. A film that I haven't seen but will no doubt inevitably end up covering as part of my ongoing look at the video nasties on my channel. But this was the only film on this tape, and the run-off is a terrestrial recording of the BBC circa 1988, consisting of the tail end of a sports programme and an incomplete documentary called Beautiful Strangers, following animals with strange or unique features. But not that strange or unique. It's like, this is a flamingo. I mean, for 1988 Britain, yeah, that's pretty exotic, but we have desert rain frogs now for that kind of shit. This doc runs right the way to the end of the tape. There wasn't even anything really in the way of continuity, which may have been interesting. The sports show ends, there's a link to the documentary, and then the documentary starts. It was all very underwhelming. Tape 15 was the last of the movie tapes, and I'd say it went out on a couple of highs. First off, we have a terrible quality European import of the New York Ripper. It's uncut, which for 1987 or 1988 was definitely a rarity. This film in particular has several infamous stories from BBFC staff who literally couldn't make it through the film due to the graphic mutilations of several women throughout. So in context, this would have been a hell of a film to own at the time. But I own it uncut on DVD anyway, and in all honesty, as I mentioned earlier with Maniac, a film that's sole premise is 90 minutes of a woman getting tortured really isn't my idea of a great night in. If the quality was even slightly better, I might have kept it purely for the VHS factor, but it's so bad. I think I'll just stick with my DVD copy. The second feature was 1981's Dawn of the Mummy, and in a weird twist of fate, the day I sold my official but cut copy of this film on VHS via eBay, I also snagged this haul. The version here is fully uncut, it's a second or third generation copy, and it looks really nice. It's this kind of happening that makes me think that the universe wants me to see this movie. So I've digitised it, and I look forward to giving it a spin in the near future. As for the runoff, two lovely little finds. First, a full-length, relatively high-quality trailer for the movie Evil Speak, which I really need to resource a copy of. I watched it years ago on Blu-ray, but wasn't that impressed, and so I sold it on. But then I started my YouTube channel and I kinda need it back. So this tape definitely reminded me to add that one to my Amazon wishlist. We then get a nice and meaty extract from The Beyond. And the upside is, the quality of this extract isn't absolutely awful. The bad news is that the majority of this extract is from the beginning of the film, which is mainly shot at night, and the generational downgrades, even though it's a fairly newish copy, basically made the majority of it look like a load of smudges moving across a black backdrop. Again, for the time this would have been a rare oddity to own, and even now it was a pleasant treat to find, but I already own The Beyond on DVD and Blu-ray, and I certainly haven't really got much of a need for a 15-ish minute extract from it from a 4th or 5th generation dub. So this tape's probably not going to be a keeper on the whole. And quite honestly, I can't think of a better or more fitting way of rounding off this haul than the way that Tape 16 did. What we have here is Sleaze Mania, a 1985 compilation tape curated and directed by Schlock's very own Fred Olen Ray. Sweet, to the point, and almost certainly no longer than an hour, this early Rhino release features everything from strip teases to drug PSAs to trailers for super early exploitation films. It's an absolute goldmine that really acts as a more than fitting epilogue for this run. Equally, the runoff appears to be another curated collection of trailers based more from the mid-60s onwards, and features all the hack-and-slash gory delight you'd come to expect from Kentucky Fried Grindhouse classics. I seriously enjoyed working through this tape, and with it being a 3rd gen copy, the quality even in the ropier sections was more than watchable. So, that's the lot. 16 tapes, some good, some bad, and some downright traumatising pictures. In a fair and just world, I'd keep them all. However, due to space limitations within my already bustling VHS collection, I'll probably end up ultimately keeping about half of them. Mainly the better quality recordings, as most of the ropier ones either weren't my thing, were too ropey for me even to bother with, or they're just films that I own on DVD and Blu-ray and I think are probably best represented in that format. But in essence, that was part of the joy of this journey, seeing the quality that some horror fans would put up with in the pursuit of uncut and unreleased treasures. Working my way through this collection that probably took someone years to build, involving countless networks of traders, bootleggers, retail shop owners, trips to conventions, and hunting down fanzines. Some of the films on these tapes have travelled literally thousands of miles across a near 35-year history to arrive in my tape room in 2021. And when you consider how much time, effort, blood, sweat and tears went into sneaking these movies over international borders to get them into the hands of film fans, well, the sheer weight of the history in these chunks of plastic far outstrips the materials they're made from. Certain cross-sections of the VHS collector community would argue, why own a copy when you can own the original? Well, when the copies have an even more colourful history than the originals, I think there's more than a justified reason in wanting to own them. Sincere thanks to everyone who reached out to me to ask that this video be made. It's been super fun checking these out, and I hope I've done it justice. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And who knows, the next watch-along livestream I do in future may well come from this collection. If you've enjoyed this video, I put out regular reviews of movies just like the ones covered here, and you can find links to my Twitter and Instagram on my channel page. And as always, your support is vastly appreciated. Till next time.